Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Ryan Heckman, the CEO of Rallyday Partners, and this is the Founder's Journey podcast. We'll explore the heart and soul of great founders and their journey to build the company of their dreams. You will learn about new industries and business models while discovering how to apply the founder's mindset to your everyday work and life. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Founder's Journey podcast. I am Ryan Heckman, your host, and I'm joined today by my very, very good friend, Tim Van Mieghem. Tim, welcome to Dimmer.
Thank you, Ryan. I am very glad to be here.
Super cool. I rarely get to do these in person. More often than not, we're doing them remotely. And it's nice to be able to look into your eyes as we go through this. Thematically, Tim, I think I shared with you that this podcast idea came to me last week. I was reading ever more gloomy news around the tariff and related socioeconomic dynamics of our new presidential administration. Yeah, nice way to put it. Thank you. Very official. Chaos, if I could call it that. And similar to COVID, the volume of headlines was just making me feel overwhelmed. And what helped me during COVID and really in the 08, 09 challenges that we had was to call really smart people and kind of go above the headlines and maybe deeper than the headlines to people who are actually the ones out there dealing with this stuff on the front line. And you were my second call. And my first call was to our first guest on this 3-part series. The series, Tim, is Wall Street, Main Street, and then quote unquote your street. And we're going to break down the economic factors of the tariff situation. You're going to talk more about how do companies respond best during this crisis. And then we're going to meet with one of our architects, Brian Kite, who you may have met. Brian's going to talk to us about the mindset of a champion when they're confronting a crisis. So we're going to do that this afternoon, as a matter of fact. So today is a full day.
I love it.
Jake Manukian preceded you, as I mentioned. He runs research and investment strategy for JP Morgan for all of North America. He was phenomenal. I had to go through like 4 gatekeepers to get to this dude and agree not to say this and not to say that. It was surprisingly a good conversation, but we did have some guardrails given, Great Morgan's place in the world. I don't think we have any such guardrails with you.
No, and no gates. I think we met out on the front lawn.
Amen. But this will be fun. As Tim and I talked before we started recording, we kind of want this to be for 2 different audiences. You've got one group who are directly affected. Companies and leaders who have a business that maybe sources in China or maybe other parts of the world that are, not as bad, but still pretty severely affected. So you've got kind of that camp. And then you've got this other camp, which is, all of us, myself included, are just sort of freaked out. And so, trying to, best case, make lemonade out of lemons for those leaders. And also just get your wisdom in terms of what does good leadership look like during this kind of time, and what operational thoughts do you have? We call them swing thoughts. Like when you're a golfer, like sometimes it's good just to have like a 2 or 3, 4 word sentence that doesn't confuse your brain, but gets you thinking maybe about your head behind the ball at impact, for example, or don't sway your hips or whatever. So it might be cool for us to go into that demographic or those leaders' lives. And then third, maybe just generally some advice around how to make the most of this time, and operationally what things you would recommend leaders focus on first. By way of background, as I mentioned, Tim is the founder and CEO of the ProAction Group. The ProAction Group started in 1996. Is that right? 95. For me, ProAction started in 2001 when I met Tim. In my 26 years or so of doing this, Tim picks up my call principally because every time I call him, I'm in trouble. And when I'm in trouble, that means he's got a revenue opportunity. So Tim has always been a very loyal partner for me, and particularly when I've been in crises. Over time, too, we've become in many ways kind of kindred spirits as we both have tried to elevate, business here in the US, broadly speaking. And we're very connected to the heart of leadership through our work. And we've been partners in crime for a long time. I would also say you can't see his face right now, but Tim is one of those guys that you're just in a better mood when you see him or you talk to him. He's got this sort of upbeat, genuine way of looking at you deeply through your eyes. And I can't quite explain it, but he's got a very special presence, no doubt honed over these many years helping other leaders. I think he has a calling for this work is what I would say. And you feel that. Tim's also the author of 1.9 books. That one of the books came out, how many years ago was that? 30 years ago. And surprisingly, the name of that book was not very catchy, Tim.
Right.
But the name of that book was Implementing Supply Chain Partnerships.
That's right.
So I don't know what the title of that book would be today, but it would be something different. But
it would be more catchy and just as relevant.
Yeah.
Oh,
how to preserve a partnership when our companies aren't getting along, for example. And his most recent book is kind of the culmination of his life, I guess, in some ways. But the title of his book that's coming out in October is called Shocking Profit. And why don't you start there, Tim? Why did you write that book? Because I think it'll bring to life, what you've been doing for the last 30 years.
Thank you. Glad to. And I'm going to start with, I really appreciate your intro and your kind words. And one part of it that I feel very deeply, I think you're right, the idea of it being a calling. The idea here, it's not about profit, going after and pursuing and being excellent in your company is not about cost cutting and being relentlessly efficient. The real transformation of what's so good about this is if you really want to claim the value you've actually created and building more, it's about engaging your people. It's about finding ways and using the opportunities to improve profitability, to develop a way for leaders to grow in your company. And that's the first part of the book is how do you see the latent value in your company? And the point here is it's never about blame or being upset. Yeah, it's actually something to celebrate. Thank God we have a hill to climb. Where would we be if we didn't have a hill to climb, right? Now we get to climb this hill. The second part of the book is how do you get the rest of the team to agree and believe in it, to accept the fact, to accept the idea that we want to climb this hill. Let's get after it. And the third section of the book is how do you do it in a way where it's not you as the CEO or leader doing it, but rather you develop your team and teach them to develop their team so it turns into a cycle. It's kind of what we're finding now. I think of the current political economic situation as sort of COVID 2.0. It's another opportunity. We've got a burning platform. We don't have to convince people. We need to take action to change. So let's use that to put some of these ideas forward. And that's how I'd summarize the book.
And for us to understand the depth of wisdom in the book, it might be helpful to talk about the scope of work that you guys have been doing at the ProAction Group for the last 30 years, just for our audience who may not be as familiar with ProAction.
Thank you. Yes. So we help companies build demand well, is the way I like to think about it. Very simple. There's lots.
Say it again. I'm sorry.
We help companies build demand well. So what I like about that way of describing it is it's not necessarily about efficiency or specifically profitability, but filling demand well means we're providing the customers what they need. It's the basics. We're on time. We're performing what we said we perform when we say we perform it. But it's also about recognizing sometimes it's the value of flexibility. It's the value of being able to onboard a new product quickly. Whatever, when we follow and we are paying attention to the demand signals from our customers, helping the company to get really good at that. And it's always a combination of things that people will have heard. Lean manufacturing, quality systems, sales and operations planning, supply chain, sourcing, logistics. There's never a silver bullet. the point is not to sub-optimize, but to actually help the company satisfy customer demand.
And the clients that you work with, I mean, from my perspective, you're deeply in the private equity industry. How many different private equity firms have you worked for in the past? And what is the mix between private equity owned companies and, let's say, family owned or privately held companies?
We've worked for over 110 different private equity firms. And historically, for the last 15 years, 80-90% of our business has been private equity. However, especially the last couple of years, the amount of work we're doing for family-owned businesses is increasing. And I think part of that has been the volatility in doing deals. It's difficult, and companies are more interested now in preparing themselves for a sale or to be a good platform. And so we're doing quite a bit of work with family-owned businesses.
That's awesome. 110 firms. I wonder how many portfolio companies would be in there.
Yeah, I could give a partial answer only since we started using our CRM, but it's in the 600-700 range at least.
That's incredible. And how many consultants do you have?
35.
35.
Mm-hmm.
And are they split into different disciplines of business, so to speak?
Yes. The way that we split it is not by industry. We have, by nature, people have different industry focus throughout, but it's really focusing on the disciplines. So, either lean, supply chain, sales and operations planning, sourcing. And the other piece that I think is really become clear is we have people that are good at taking the hill and good people who are good at figuring out which hill to take. And we need both on every project.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, the engagements that I've done with you, and you actually teed this whole topic up through the sequencing and structure of your new book, with what sounds to be like 2/3 of it devoted to getting the right mindset and getting your team on board. And that led me to conclude that, and maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but what strikes me about the people that Tim has hired into ProAction is that all of them, two or one of them, their soft skills, their ability to empower and lead others, hearts and mind, are in many ways more powerful than their subject matter expertise. Was that something you did by design because of the change management dynamics?
Yes. The two criterion that we have for hiring somebody, one of them is that they can lead without authority, which is what you're describing here. They don't need to tell you, you got to do this because I'm in charge. They work with people, they connect. It's one of the best things about my job. People are like, you enjoy your job. I'm like, how could I not? Like, all I do is connect with people and then solve problems. Like, it's so much fun. But the one thing I would say is to emphasize the other piece, the importance of them having a deep technical competence in an area is critical. We have brought on people that are sort of good managers, like a VP of ops who knows how to manage upward. They do great in that company, but if you bring them somewhere else, they're not effective.
It's just not portable.
It's not portable. Exactly. Because a lot of the things that we help people do are so counterintuitive and so against what they've been taught for so long. And it's a muscle they haven't used that the only way you can help them do it is to hold their hand and walk through it. And if you don't have the experience, it's impossible.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. You started the business with your partner, Doug. Tell us a bit about that. How did you guys form ProAction? What was your vision? And have you more or less, using our words, have you built a company of your dreams at this point?
In so many ways. I've still got a hill to climb, which keeps it fun. So Doug has been my partner for 22 years. And here's some things that were critical about why we work so well together. One is we're two sides of the coin, both so passionate about what we do. But I'm the guy who, if you call me on Friday or a Thursday night and say, hey, I've got a plant. Can you come look at it in the morning? I'm like, sure, I'll be there. Doug is the kind of guy who this happened once. I called him up. I said, Doug, we've got this new opportunity. I need 45 minutes on the phone with you. When can you do it? And he's like, oh, hold on. Sure, I can't wait. Next Thursday at 4. I'm like, and what was so different, what that story tells me is I get to look and think of ideas, the visionary, what's possible, what can we do? His passion was, we signed up to do something, we're going to do it. He was all about execution, service delivery, and he brought with it that same heart that you described before. And one thing I'll share is that Doug passed away in January after a fight with cancer. And to show his heart and the impact that this has on a company, he had spent the last 3 years actually, preparing our company, our succession plan. Let's get the company so it's not the Tim and Doug show. How do we get beyond that? And the time he spent coaching and developing our team, when back in October, things took a turn for the worse, he was no longer able to really participate. It was seamless. Ryan, like the mark of a leader is what happens after they're gone, and Doug lived that.
It is interesting that a lot of leaders know that, or at least we, our instincts, or at least we say that, but I mean, few of us get to see what happens when we leave, right? So what's interesting about your partnership with Doug is in many ways, he's still your partner.
Yeah.
Because he passed in January of 25, and to see the wake of strength and confidence that your people have picked up must just be so cool for you. And I can only imagine you look up and say thank you to Doug from time to time.
All the time. I sure do. And I ask him to put in a good word with the big guy for us. He seems to be doing that.
We've lived a charmed life. Yeah. All right. So the point of today is to talk about these damn tariffs. The reason I called you is I wanted to find out what some of your clients were doing about this. Let's talk about the group of your client base that has direct exposure into China. What are some of the problems that you're hearing from them? And what are some of the things that you are working on with your clients, like real time?
Yeah. Thank you.
And how many of them are like really freaked out?
They're on a bit of a spectrum, and there are some that, if they've got 60% of what they sell comes from China or is directly coming from China, they have a short window to make some big changes. The good news is, we went through this 5 years ago with COVID starting, and I think there are many companies, at the very least, they're working with companies that are based in China, but now have operations in Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, what have you. That is one trend that allows them to maintain their current relationship and de-risk to some degree. I also want to get back to one basic that this highlights. It's clarity on your exposure to the tariffs. And I think about this like someone going to court without an attorney. You're going to get ravaged. It's just brutal. And one recent story, Kristen Mullen, who's on our team, helped a client through, was very much related to this. And they found millions in tariffs that were paid that they were able to recoup because if they had not been audited, their matrix of the HS codes were not clear and accurate. And here's an example, like there's many exemptions to many tariffs, but they don't just give them to you. If you don't ask for it, you don't get it. It's very similar to just freight bills in general over the last 30, 40 years. There's whole companies that their entire purpose was, we're going to audit your freight bills we'll just take a third of what we find. And they're off to the races because it's so pervasive. The first one is just, hire the equivalent of the attorney. Get an expert in, document what you're doing, do an audit and review. So you're not spinning your wheels on top of dealing with this crisis.
I mean, funny you should say that. We own a business that is like 90% sources from China. And we've been in the process of moving that production to other regions, in this case, principally Vietnam, and to a lesser degree, subassembly down in Mexico. But when President Trump mentioned that, I think it was like on a Friday, that there were going to be these exemptions for smartphones. My wording isn't going to be perfect, but it was like smartphones, semiconductors, and electronics. Like that was the catchphrase. The products that we source out of China are not, I wouldn't necessarily put them in either one of those three. I mean, they're definitely on smartphones. And so I didn't think anything of it. I did think Apple stock was going to rally. And I was shocked that Tim Cook got that done. But by Monday, our version of an attorney, our customs and tariff consultant that works for us in LA, they had advised us by noon that in fact, all of our products were exempt from at least the reciprocal tariff, not the base. And so all of a sudden, we went from like, oh my God, we might be dead. We only had a month of inventory, something like that, to basically negotiating a 3% reduction in our supply agreement with our supplier and a commensurate 3% increase in price. And those two moves offset the entirety of the tariffs. But had you asked me that on Friday, I mean, not to exaggerate, but we were looking at our bank covenants on Friday. And by Monday, we were just kind of tweaking our budget. The speed and the ambiguity of this thing is similar to COVID. If you think about it, like all the stuff that was happening, it's just in this case, it's legally thick and opaque versus biologically opaque. And that's the difference here.
It's a big part of the difference. And it leads to that same conclusion. And another aspect of that too, beyond the clarity, I think too, is it is continuing to focus on the basics that once we got the clarity, I think about this like turning on a light switch. We walk into a room, we turn the light switch, it goes on every time. What would happen if we went in and 80% or 90% of the time it went on? Can you imagine, Ryan, we'd have candles, we'd have torches, we'd have, and that's what's happening in a lot of companies today. Like when we're with control over our supply chain, our understanding and control over any inventory, where it is, how much is there, is also surprisingly, is another area that if you don't have that buttoned down, it will exacerbate. It'll multiply the negative impact. Like when I think about COVID, there's a lot of companies that looked brilliant because they were carrying double, triple the inventory they need.
It pays to be a very bad inventory manager during COVID.
But by the end of COVID, the companies that, like volatility, you brought up volatility. If volatility isn't part of your demand planning and your supply planning, you'll get creamed at a time like this. It's part of the variable. The basics of material planning and, just-in-time inventory used to be called work. But if you're not paying attention to volatility and the lead times used to be 2 weeks, now it's 20. Oh, and I've got this volatility. That impacts those numbers in your process. The companies that had excess inventory at the beginning of COVID looked brilliant for a while, but they're also the companies today that are, what the hell do I do with all this inventory? Because they kept doing the same thing, thinking it would work, and they buy everything they could for so long. And now the demand that was the response to external stimuli, shockingly enough, didn't last. It went back to where it was. It wasn't a permanent shift, and they got caught by it.
Well, we talked about the uncertainty and the needing a lawyer to guide you through some of this stuff. The equivalent of a lawyer is metaphor. The second topic you're bringing up is volatility. And, there was an article in the journal this morning, as a matter of fact, about this topic, but let's just sort of do our best to kind of predict what's going to happen over the next 3 or 4 months. And, full disclaimer, I'm sure whatever we're going to say will be roughly wrong, right. But I think the train of thought might be interesting to follow. But, very recently it was reported that shipping out of China and into the United States is down somewhere between 30 to 40% through the first 2.5 weeks after the tariffs were announced, scheduling to go down further, which means we're getting half the products that we normally do out of China, which means if you're a company that needs those products for raw material, you're going to have a shortage and probably a bidding war for what's available, which means higher prices. Consumer will likely confront shelves at the grocery store or Target or Walmart or whatever that look a little bit COVID-ish, sparse. And it's expected, at least what I read today, that on the given the average inventory of companies, they expect that those kinds of things to rear their head in mid-May. And then who knows what happens in terms of a policy response. What are you seeing or hearing that is different than that, Tim? And how would you roll this forward? And how long do you think we're going to be dealing with this? And I would add to this just the reality of supply chains, container ships, and just how complicated all this stuff is. And for example, when you don't have containers coming to the United States with product, that means there's no containers here to ship. So how does this all work? If you don't mind, and roll us forward maybe to, I don't know, September.
Yeah. I think the first piece, there's a few things that come to mind. One is, we don't know when it's going to change. So we had a client, and this is maybe a good example to kind of use to play it out, that they have factories in the US and in Canada. And as soon as this came out, they started making plans to move some of the lines in Canada to the United States to avoid the tariffs. And then literally the next week after they started this, the situation changed with Canada. And I think a couple things that come to mind with that are, one, we have to assume it's going to continue, but we can't, if we say we think it's going to be normalized by September, we can't do that. This could be a long-term play. And because, with someone like Trump who's in office, it can radically change. So, which is very difficult. If you're in a endless kind of reaction mode, it's brutal. What we're seeing and what really helps, and this is part of getting back to the basics here, is scenario planning, landed cost analysis. It's understanding what happens if I start buying this. Instead of buying it from China, I get my resources from the US or from another country, and playing out those options to evaluate then, instead of purely reacting to, okay, there's a tariff today, I've got to radically change my supply chain, to what are the 4 most likely things that are going to happen? Let's play it out. And then you get to go back and talk with your suppliers. And if you're going to talk with your suppliers and have it mean anything, you have to have a relationship with them. There has to be some level of trust. And if you're purely transactional, there's you're kneecapped in what you can do with your suppliers. So go back to the suppliers, develop that relationship, work with them, evaluate options. Many suppliers are saying, I'm going to ride this with you. We'll share the costs. We'll move, we're going to open up a facility or move your production to a facility in a different country. There's so many different things that could be done if you are able to have that
I
conversation.
mean, let's just pause for a second because that's such a basic,
Yeah.
like, right, fundamental step that many of us would not take because, like, you're kind of in chaos. You've got so much other stuff that's on your mind. The last thing you necessarily want to do is jump on a plane and go to China. However, when the same portco that I mentioned was going through this with COVID, and what was striking then is we couldn't even fly to China.
Right.
And that was really tough. We had just bought this business and didn't know the supplier, didn't know their family, hadn't broken bread with them. And it made every negotiation with them just that much harder because, to your point, we hadn't established trust.
Right.
And so, I mean, that's an incredibly powerful idea, is start with the relationship first and then move forward. And you can fly to China still. It's not that big of a deal. Okay, so that's step one. What's another thing?
Well, another one is going the other direction and talking to your customers and previewing with them what's going to happen. And I think there's two lessons here. One is do the price increases. Like this is something everybody knows and sees. If there's ever a time that you can justify a price increase, it's now. Just like we had in COVID, and there were companies that resisted passing on price increases for whatever reason. Maybe just it was not their practice to do so, but it was an opportunity to do it.
Or they were just waiting for the good news.
Yeah,
Was your first thing. Let's even before relationship was your other big one, which was, you were correcting me, Ryan, do not look at this through September.
right.
Assume this is the new normal and get over it. Like, accept as reality. Okay. Step 2, go meet with your suppliers and build trust. Step 3 is now opening a fluid and transparent dialogue with your customer base.
Amen. And I was just talking to someone on Friday who's doing this, and most of their customers are like, we know this is going on. We're not exactly sure how we can manage this, but they're in discussions. They're evaluating it. They're talking about, like you said, transparency. There's one that I've heard about. Home Depot has said, we are not taking any price increases. They'd rather have empty shelves than shelves filled with product that they may not be able to sell at that price point.
Whoa.
Right. Well, there's one company, so it's one company's experience, but that is so. But again, how much better off are we that we're working with that knowledge and transparency? Can go back to them and say, you do realize this is going to mean empty shelves. Are you good with that? And it brings it to a head, as opposed to finding out when you're ready to ship a container load and it's got a 10% price increase. They're like, yeah, we're not taking it. Right. It's the continued transparency and conversations throughout your supply chain and with your customers.
What about your employees? I mean, let's go there for a second. Like, we take for granted, or not for granted, that's the wrong word. We probably over-index our own anxiety. I mean, human nature is that way. But also, I think when you're the CEO or you're a senior executive, you feel like you are carrying the company on your shoulders most days. And so when you're overly focused on your own demeanor and like surviving to fight another day kind of thinking, you probably are not doing as many one-on-ones. You're not walking, you're not talking, you're not putting your arm around people in your workforce to calm them down. What would you say is best practice there?
So yeah, boy, it's one, just going to Gemba or going to where the work is being done and connecting with people is always a great thing to do. And I'm going to add another point that's really topical to the operations. Like, I think another aspect of this sort of COVID 2.0, the burning platform that's out there, is to use it to drive operational improvements. And Ryan, the number of times that we see a company that when they run into a burning platform, like, and here's one example. We had a client that produced salmon fillets, and they landed Costco and Sam's Club in the same quarter. literally doubled sales, and they were freaking out. They couldn't build a factory fast enough to handle the new volume. They were running 24/7 and needed to increase output like 40% just to satisfy the new demand. And we got a chance to walk through it, and they hired us to do a 3-week study to say, can you fit enough equipment in our current factory to get the output? We started on Monday. On Tuesday, we said, forget the study, give us 8 weeks. 8 weeks later, no additional people, no additional equipment. Not only did we get the 40% output, but we went from a 7 to a 5-day work week. All through operational, lean, quality, process improvements, scheduling, things like that. Here's my point. We're so worried about going to low-cost countries or so focused on it when we're radically inefficient and giving away velocity. We're slowing down our plants the way that they're being run today. So part of this is to look inward and say, what is our real capacity? What's our real opportunity here?
Well, and to the point you made about your suppliers, step one is to build trust with your workforce and maybe a fair amount of inspiration around, hey guys, like we need all of your ideas. We're going to come with some ideas. We want you to come to some ideas, but we've got to figure out how to reduce our production expenses so that we can survive. And I don't think that's too strong of a word.
One of the things that I've heard this so many times, and it keeps becoming more and more real, is that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And the idea here in my mind is exactly what you're talking about, Ryan. If you can help your workforce to truly feel comfortable and engaged and empowered to be problem solvers, to own what they're working on and doing, they are going to flourish and find opportunities to improve, especially if you provide good direction and training and all that kind of stuff. And if you don't, if today it's really transactional, they come in work, we've got absenteeism issues, whatever, you can get rough, but you could also start now. Just start now, go walk the floor, talk to people, what's going on, and start showing that if you measure something, it's not to beat them over the head or to justify firing somebody. It's so that we can work together to improve. That we can always start there.
Yeah, there's an expression that you don't want to find a friend when you need them. But better late than never. I mean, you might as well walk in there and be vulnerable and talk about, where we're at. And obviously with an abundance of love to that workforce and their own plight. I mean, they're nervous about their families and, increases in prices of things like eggs and stuff that's, seems very basic, but is very real. But if you were writing the book of your company 5 years out, you could say, while the tariff crisis was bad, these are some things that came out of this that were good. One, I actually went to China for the first time, and I met the family of the owner of the business that had been sending us product for decades and had never gotten on that plane. Number two, I got in front of my customers, and I think we got a lot more market share just because I was honest and transparent and talked to them up front before my other competitors did. And that was transformational for my company. Kind of making up words here. But three, it was an awakening for me as an executive that I hadn't spent enough time on the floor, where the real wisdom does live, kind of connected to the soil, so to speak. And it kind of changed our culture from a top down to much more of a partnership with our workforce to identify ways of becoming more productive. And 5 years later, the tariffs are gone, but I'm twice as profitable because of all those things combined. And that's the kind of like inspiration that might, change a company's entire future.
I have a family story on this. My sister started a company in 2007. It's called Drapery Street, and they do window dressings, blinds, curtains, and things like that for homes. And 5 or 6 years ago, she shared with me, I got to stop. This is killing me. she was in on every sale. She was in on installations and operations, and it was really difficult. And she intentionally then started working on succession plans. She knew if she wanted to ever exit, she had to not be personally involved with everything. So over the next few years, she developed her team that were handling sales, trained them on how to do sales, how to ask the right questions. She's now part of like 5% of sales instead of 80. She's got a strong operations lead who is passionate and has the discretion to run the operations and my sister shared with me last summer, she goes, now running my company is a hobby. I do it because I love it. I could sell it now and do great, but I don't want to sell it. And the same steps we're talking about here, taking to try to maybe avoid a negative, to connect with your employees, find out, really get to know them, get to know your suppliers and your customers, and build these processes that work, that they're invested in, not because you came up with them, but you empowered them to do it, also leads to giving you as the leader time to think about what's next for the company, and not to be involved in solving every problem that comes down the road.
That's a great analog. One thing that I've also noticed, having engaged with you guys on a few occasions, is there's a biblical expression that a prophet hath no honor in his own kingdom.
Right.
And clearly the private equity guy is not going to have any honor in any kingdom, but especially in the companies that we own, where there's a view that we're opportunists and profiteers and all the narrative that goes with being an owner of a company. I think what was so powerful is that when we engage ProAction, your people connected with our workforce really quickly and without all that baggage, where it was very objective. All of your people are good at storytelling. We went through this before, and, like your story about landing Costco and Walmart and needing to boost productivity. I mean, that story alone can give people a sense of hope without the baggage of ownership or corporate. The other thing is, I think for a lot of our companies, we're guilty of this at Rallyday, for example. I'll tell you a family story. My mom and dad are kind of clutter people. Like, I'm not going to say they're hoarders, but they're damn close to it. And I asked my mom one day, I go, can you look around and just see all this clutter? She said, Ryan, I know what you're saying, but like, I don't see it anymore. Those are my treasures. And it really dawned on me that hiring a third party like ProAction, if nothing else, getting a diagnostic or an assessment without the blinders of historical biases, or there's another expression, you can't read the label from inside the bottle.
Sure.
And
right.
In this context, I think we could add a fourth or fifth step here. This is like a 12-step self-help thing, which would be use this crisis to hire some third parties, whoever they may be, just to get another set of eyes, because you don't know what you don't know, and you don't see what you can't see anymore. And a third party definitely will see it, and it will definitely know it. And if you pay them to give you visibility, you're just going to be that much more powerful of an executive.
Could not agree more. There's a few things I think that are important about that. One is, it's important to have someone come in who's not committed to a specific outcome. Like, one of the things that we talk about a lot from our perspective at ProAction is our highest level of integrity is to tell them what they need to hear and the truth. We're not there to sell a project. We are there to just, here's what's going on and here's what it means. A lot of times it leads to work, but it can't be the point. And the other one is that they have to be focused or coming from a mindset of action. Theoretical reviews are way less helpful. And, kind of like you were joking about how private equity people are viewed. Consultants are kind of viewed, when I bring up that I'm a consultant, half the people roll their eyes, the other half do it internally. And you have to remember that, at the best case, like private equity, the beautiful role that private equity plays is helping founder-led businesses transform and become the vision that the founder had. Like they can't do it without process and scalability and growth. And they've never taken a company from 10 or 20 million to 100 or 200 million. On the consulting side, it's the same thing. Bring accuracy. What is happening? What matters? And then the perspective, because it's so often the case where one of the first epiphanies I had was, you have to reduce inventory to increase sales. That sounds crazy. But what we find often is that companies are using their capacity and their working capital to make something today that they're going to sell in 6 months, not what they can sell literally tomorrow, as an example. And I also think of one of the best movie scenes, at least to me, if you ever saw Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, there's that one scene where Steve Martin's sleeping in the car and John Candy's driving, and John Candy starts honking the horn and wakes up Steve Martin. He's like, "What's going on?" And he goes, "These jokers over here, they want to race." And he looks over, there's another car driving with them, honking, yelling at him. He goes, "Don't race, that's stupid. What?" And then they want to say something, and they're like, "Roll your window down." And he looks over and he's still groggy, and they say, "You're going the wrong way." Steve Martin goes to John Candy. They say, "We're going the wrong way." John Candy's like, "Oh, they're drunk. How would they know where we're going?" And Steve Martin's like, "Yeah, how would they know?" And then it clicks. "Oh no, we're not going to the wrong place. We're going the wrong way down the road, and trucks are coming at them." And, they had no idea what was happening, but then the right observation, right question opened up their mind.
Yeah, they were going the right direction, just in the wrong lane. We just watched Steve Martin's, I think it's on Netflix. It could be Prime, but it's a 2-part documentary about his life, beginning with his stand-up career early in his life to television, and then to his quote-unquote afterlife, where he's taken all the lessons learned and he's raising a family and all these kinds of things. It was very touching, and they had several clips from that particular movie that you just referenced, Planes, Trains, and Automobile. Anywho, okay, well, so we've got some really good steps here. What else is, Tim, like, as if you're now envisioning talking to thousands of executives out there that are maybe to some extent in the fetal position, any other advice that you would give them as they confront this crisis?
Yeah, I do. I'll go back to it that the first basic is to take inventory of where you are, bring in the right resources to document, audit your prior tariffs if you're directly in it. Second is talk to your customers, connect with your suppliers. And to the extent that you have the opportunity to ramp up production in the US in existing factories, then I would look at your velocity. Really test it. Do we really know what our capacity is? Because so often we don't. And I think the concept of you have a burning platform. You don't have to prove to people that change is needed. Use that, leverage it, and take stock. Look at different aspects of your company to see where you can improve in it. The price increases, are how we run our operations. How well are we able to predict anything? That, to me, is one of the value levers in any business that's often overlooked. From, can I predict what my sales will be this month, to can I predict what my day will look like? And the reason it's so important is not partially just to get good at predicting. Visibility prediction is so much better than forecasting. The other piece is because I can test my execution against the plan. At the end of the day, that closed loop is how you continuously improve. And if there's any aspects of your business today where that is lacking, this is a great time to bring it up and say, we can't leave this chance anymore.
Well, you're pairing kind of as a Rahm Emanuel quote, don't ever waste good crises, right?
Yes.
Don't ever waste the moment. So you're kind of bringing that in here. I think you're also suggesting, like, don't try to solve tariffs, try to make your company better as maybe step one, and don't lose sight of the opportunity to do so, which is your third point, which is so often, if you told your workforce, look, I want to take my EBITDA margins from 11 to 12. Probably not going to get the followership, right, that you intended. But if you say, look, I don't want to lay anybody off, and I want us to have a company that we all love, like in a year, and so we're going to have to make some changes, that's probably going to resonate
Absolutely.
more powerfully. But you got to do all of these things at the same time, I guess, is what you're saying. Okay, let's take just a step back. I would like to give some advice, unsolicited, on how to deal with banks during this stuff. And I've learned a thing or two about this. The temptation is to not share bad news with your bank. I mean, I think we all are guilty of, like when we meet each other on the street, how's it going? Oh, it's going great.
Yeah.
And we kind of put on airs of confidence. What I learned is that with banks in particular, because of the way they're regulated, if you go to your bank and get a waiver before you've missed a payment or before you've actually broken a covenant, the bank does not have to share that with their regulatory authorities. It doesn't end up in the same pile. So the ones to go to the bank the soonest and say, look, based on our projections, we are going to blow covenants in 9 months. I'd like to deal with that now, are the ones that are going to be okay. The other ones, and this is human nature, the ones that say, well, I'm still paying interest. I'll be able to make my principal payments. And when I break covenants, we'll deal with it then. And that's the wrong idea. Get out ahead of this with your bank, because first you got first mover advantage, and don't waste that moment either. So I wanted to make sure when we're talking about people to get in touch with, those are the biggies. We're going to talk about in our third podcast, the other person you've got to get in touch with, which is yourself. And I think this is one of these, we could very easily gloss over this one. Your bank is very important. Your customer is very important. Your suppliers are very important. Your employees are very important. But as a leader, if you're not taking care of yourself and giving yourself a little bit of grace and compassion and empathy for that which you are leading, you might have spillover effects from this crisis that could impact your marriage, for example. It could impact your health because you're not working out. And God knows when you're under stress, you're not sleeping either. And, there are going to be some people, like during COVID, where somehow their lives improved. Others, the divorce rate went high during COVID. Children were having issues with social anxiety and dealing with not going to school and the social dynamics of that. But in this case, you're only going to be as powerful with those people as you are whole. And I wonder, Tim, you've been through so many business cycles. What recommendations would you have for executives to make sure they're taking care of themselves in all this so that they are better equipped to handle this than not?
What a great question. And I think there's going to be a lot of similarities to what we've talked about already. The first piece is to understand, slow down to speed up, to take stock of where you are, pull in your team, be transparent and vulnerable with them, so that you can divide and conquer, talk to your suppliers, understand what your options are. That the scenario play, things like a landed cost analysis, the HS code matrix, the scenario planning helps you to see, like we often worry about what's the worst thing that could happen. And it's tragic beyond comprehension. But then when you really start to dig in and explore it, it's not nearly that bad. It's much more manageable. There's parts of it that we can mollify completely. There's other parts that we have to address in a difficult way, what have you. But it starts with that scenario planning is like the critical piece, I think, can give somebody real peace, and knowing that this isn't, I'm either going to die or I'm going to thrive. There's a lot of manageability in here. And it's part of what we do in our as a normal part of our life at ProAction, we never just go in and start doing something. We don't just go in and do lean or sourcing. It's always starts with an assessment. Where are we and where do we want to go? And it provides good clarity and what are the actual critical path steps. That's the place to start. Slow down to speed up. So you're not reacting. And if you play out, what if Trump turns on the tariff? What if he turns it off? What if he turns it on, then turns it off? Or there's some aspect of it. We can work through those and you've got a game plan.
Yeah. And then on the personal side, I'm adding to your list of recommendations, but we do a personality assessment here called the Enneagram. I'm sure you're familiar. It's like Myers-Briggs or these other assessment tools. But one of the foundations of Enneagram is that our personalities, there's 9 of them in this system. And there's kind of a spectrum of when you're at your best or your stress levels are the lowest, this is how you naturally show up. And then it gets into this place of, and when you're under severe stress, this is how you're going to show up. And I'll tell you, in my case, it ranges from, I'm not kidding, from like, I'm the best guy to be by your side through thick and thin, and I'm very loyal, and, I'm going to be inspirational and awesome, to like, I'm a sociopath when I'm under stress. I'm not kidding. And every one of the 9 has a version of this. So one of my takeaways from learning more about where I go wrong is when I'm confronted with a majorly intense project, or I know that I'm coming into a really dark chapter of my business, I've learned to go to my close group of friends, my wife, even my children, to say, hey, I'm going to be going under some stress. I want to give you permission to help me not become the sociopath, keep me in the middle of the fairway, and I might need your help. There's an expression, that it's lonely at the top, and I just completely disagree with that, because that's a prison of your own making. It doesn't have to be lonely at the top. Invite other people to help you, and for some of our personalities, we just want to kind of put our head down, and when we get home, we might be pensive and not present. Inside, we're in turmoil, but nobody knows it. And so you become even more lonely because you're even lonely when you're at home. And so I would just say, like, when you're doing your assessment, as you just said, of your business, maybe do it of yourself and just let people know that you've got like 300 or 400 to 5,000, 6,000, 10,000 employees that are counting on your judgment. And that pressure is tough some days, and just get it out there. It's okay.
Endlessly good news, Ryan. It's, one of the things I've learned too is when you are vulnerable and are transparent about what's going on, it gives other people permission to be the same. And you know what? There's going to be people who you might be the only person who's heard them in a long time. Can you, it's such a beautiful thing. Not only does it, the tension that you brought it up for was so that it helps you to de-stress and to have people participate in helping you to be calm and present, and it also gives them permission to do the same. What a gift.
Yeah, that's a very good point. By sharing your own challenges, you're giving the other person the permission to do the same. And that's where organizational intimacy is created. What matters to you matters to me. And, that's a really sacred bond, and a good way, I think, for us to end the time. Tim, you're always just been so good about answering my phone calls. And I do know that if I had a personal issue, you'd pick up that phone just as quick and be on an airplane to Denver if I asked you to be. And that means a lot. And you bring that to all of your relationships. So I want to end by saying thank you for doing this podcast. It was such a great coincidence, serendipity, that you were in Denver. It's always wonderful to see your face in person. Thank you for the work that you're doing to elevate private equity, as we are trying. And thank you for your kindred spirit.
So my pleasure. And thank you, Ryan. Thank you for seeing this. And you made my day. It means so much to hear this, and I really appreciate it.
Okay. My pleasure, and thank you. And I wish you and your clients the greatest of success.